Hey guys, I'm Saurav. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I won't be explaining anything. Actually, I will be answering the questions that you guys have asked on my Instagram. So this is my Instagram account. If you're not following me, go ahead and follow. I post photos and tips there, so it will be helpful for you also. Now, I posted a photo and I asked you guys to ask some questions in the comments below. I'm going to answer some of those questions. Now, the main question of this video, as the title suggests, is career in photography. It's a long question and I have kept that question for the last. So if you're interested only in that question, you can go to the timestamp you're seeing on the screen right now. If you're interested to see all the questions, you can continue watching the video, right? So without wasting any time, let's get started. Okay, so the first question is, imagine you have access to all the resources like tools and technology to build your dream camera. How would it be? Okay, so I have a very similar question to this that is talking about my predictions about the future camera technology. Let me answer both these questions together because these answers kind of overlap for me. Talking about my dream camera, photography wise, I would love to have a higher megapixel count, something like a 40-50 megapixels, but that also performs good in low light when you're using ISO like 3200 or 6400. There are cameras with higher resolution sensors, there are cameras that perform good in low light. There are very few cameras that do both together, so I would love to have something like that. Obviously good speed, something like 20 fps like the Sony A9 has, that is really helpful in sports and wildlife photography. Now this is in terms of photos. In terms of videos, I would love to see cameras doing more internal raw video, like the recent 1DX Mark III shoots internal raw video. I think that's really dope. I would love to have 4K 120 fps as well. Like my Nikon Z6 shoots 1080p 120 fps and I love it, but imagine the same 120 fps in 4K. That would be really great. And if a camera is able to shoot 4K 120 fps, it will actually be able to do 1080p 480 fps. So that is really slow motion. So I would love to have that. And talking about future, I obviously think cameras are going to come with those features, but I feel cameras are going to come with some internal cooling system. Now what do I mean by that? Now it is not that cameras cannot shoot 1080p 240 fps or 4K 60 fps or even more than that. The sensor is capable of shooting higher resolution. The problem is with the processing. The camera is not able to process so much of data in a single second. And that is why the camera will heat up and the camera will actually start melting theoretically. And that is why you don't see compact cameras doing those kind of things. So I believe there is going to be some kind of internal cooling system, like a RED camera has an internal fan that actually takes the wind in and it helps to keep the camera system cool, and that is why RED cameras are able to do 8K 60 and 4K slow motion. So I feel that is something I really hope and I would really like to see in the future cameras. The second question is, which autofocus mode is best for macro photography? Okay, so in macro photography, always use autofocus single point autofocus is best, but that is when you're using autofocus. But if you personally ask me, I would always prefer using manual focus over autofocus in terms of macro photography. Because when you're using a macro lens, the depth of field is so less even at f22. If the autofocus actually slightly misses the focus, the shot can be out of focus totally. And the autofocus doesn't give you complete control. So in terms of macro photography, I feel the best option and the safest option is to use manual focus. It gives you a lot more control and you're sure that your shot is in focus. So yeah, single point autofocus is the way to go, but if possible, use manual focus. The third question is, what is my dream camera and my dream lens? Okay, this is a slightly tricky question. Again, I feel I have two different answers. When it comes to photography, I feel I would love to use the 1DX Mark III or the upcoming Nikon D6. And in terms of lens, again, the 400mm 2.8 would be a dream for me. That's an amazing lens for sports and wildlife. Talking about videography, I would love to own a RED camera. That's my dream. I hope someday I own a RED camera. And in terms of lenses, I would love to have the Cine lenses. When you combine the RED camera and the Cine lenses, the output is really amazing. The next question is, on Instagram, I see trends of picture that arise in fashion. Is that a good way to follow those trends for a betterment? This is, I feel, a very interesting question, and I get this question a lot, and for me this question has two parts. Talking about the yes part, it's always good to follow different trends that are going on Instagram, on different social media. This way you get to experiment, you get to learn many more things. Now that is the positive thing. Talking about the no part, as the trends continuously change on Instagram, people change their style of photography. Now this is not good. A person who has mastered a style over the years, you're trying to replicate that work in certain days or weeks, you're not going to get the same level of images that person does, right? You have to practice a lot, and then you feel you're not a good photographer. This is not good. You have to find your own style and you have to develop that style to be a good photographer. Always experimenting and learning new things is good, but also make sure there's some signature style that you're developing over the years. I feel that's the way to develop as a photographer. Now this is subjective, but this is my opinion. The problem with today's generation is people are confused whether they want to become a good Instagrammer or a good photographer. Now, if you want to be a good Instagrammer, following the trends is fine if you are looking for more followers and likes. But if you want to be a better photographer, working on your style, analyzing your work and developing over the years is the way to go according to me. The next question is, how do you manage a balance between your work and photography? Again, I have a similar question about managing my studies, my photography, doing YouTube and gym. Okay, so the thing is, I get this question a lot of times. I have answered this question in my TEDx video as well. If you haven't watched that video, go ahead and watch that. Now, talking about managing time, I feel it is less about managing time and it is more about prioritizing your things, okay? So when you have a lot of things to do, 24 hours in a day is always going to feel less. So the best thing to do is prioritize. Okay, these things are more important, these things are less important. I have to complete the things that are more important for me and I will later focus on the part that is less important, right? So I feel this is again a very subjective thing. Priority is something that is different for me, that is different for you. And the sooner you understand how to prioritize things for your own betterment, I think you will eventually understand how to manage time. But focus on more important things. And talking about time management, it is something that will eventually happen if you're really determined and if you believe in yourself. Like I was really determined that I have to continue my studies, I have to do photography, I want to make YouTube videos, I want to work on my fitness as well. So I was really determined about it, and that was one reason I was able to do it. So obviously having determination really helps, but also at the same time, prioritizing and understanding what is more important will help you also. The next question is, Saurav, do you like to come out of your comfort zone and like to feel the taste of street and wildlife photography? Obviously, I love to come out of my comfort zone. So my comfort zone is landscape and nature photography. I love that. But recently I've been trying some wildlife photography as well. Frankly speaking, I'm guilty of not trying much street photography, but I'm going to do that very soon. Now, coming out of comfort zone, I feel is very important because then you realize there are a lot of things to learn about photography. The problem with staying in comfort zone is that you feel you have learned everything as a photographer, and doesn't matter how great of a photographer a person is, no one has mastered an art form 100%. There's always more things to learn, and you will realize this when you come out of comfort zone. So I always like to come out of my comfort zone every now and then, so I remain humble and understand, okay, there are a lot of things to learn and I have a long way to go to become a good photographer. The next question is about career in photography. Now this is a question I get most frequently asked recently. Now this is a very important question and I feel this is going to be a long answer, okay? There are 5 things that I want to cover. The first thing is about scope. People ask me, Saurav, do you have good scope in photography? My answer to them always is, photography or be it any career option, if you're good in it, you have good scope. If you're not good in it, you don't have good scope. Like suppose you are an engineer. Now if you're a good engineer, you will obviously do good. If you're not, you won't. That's simple. That's even the case with photography. The second thing is convincing your parents. Now I understand as a teenager this is difficult. Your parents are not actually wrong. They are tensed about you, whether you would able to make a living out of it. So what I would suggest is continue your studies and make your parents believe that you have a future in it. When you show your parents you have the potential and you will be able to make a living out of it, your parents will eventually get convinced. Rather than trying to convince them by continuously talking to them, put more efforts in doing photography and being a better photographer, and the parents will eventually get convinced. Don't worry about it. The next point is different genres. Now there are a lot of genres in photography, right? But when it comes to career, compared to street, landscape and wildlife, if you're a wedding photographer, if you're a fashion photographer, a product photographer, or you shoot real estate, then you have more chances of earning money and making a better career. Now, I'm not discouraging you if you shoot street, landscape or wildlife. I'm just saying this is a scenario of the market right now and you have a better option to make a career out of it. So even if you have a liking for street, landscape or wildlife, you have to choose something out of these options to make a living out of it. The next point I want to talk is salaried versus freelancing. Now there are two types of photographers. One is salaried, okay, you work for a company, the company hires you and pays you a fixed amount. That is the salaried one. Coming to the freelancing one, you do a lot of things and client actually book you according to your portfolio. Having a portfolio is really important if you want to be a good photographer, because clients won't care what degree you have in photography, but they will actually care how good your portfolio is. And there is no right or wrong option, it is completely subjective. If you want a safer option, salaried is the way to go. If you want your career to grow more, freelancing is the better option. Again, it is a subjective thing and it is your opinion. The last point, which is very important, is long term. When you're deciding a career option, you have to think about long term. Just because everyone is doing photography, you are also doing photography and you want a career in it, it doesn't make sense. You have to think about long term, whether you really are passionate about photography, whether you will be able to do it over the course of 20-30 years to make a good career. These are some very important points to keep in mind before thinking about opting for photography as a career option. As a photographer, you are going to have your good days and bad days as well. And that happens in every career choice. But if you're determined, if you believe in yourself, even in those bad days, and if you're able to work hard still, that will actually help you to improve and grow as a person. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A, guys. There will be more such Q&A. Again, follow me on Instagram if you're not doing that, if you want to participate in the Q&A. And I hope you liked the video. Press the like button if you did. Press the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.